My name is Melinda Person, and I am the president of New York State United Teachers. Thank you so much for joining us here today for this really important conversation about cell phones, social media, and technology, and their impact on our students and our schools. Today we've gathered a dedicated group of teachers, parents, superintendents, school board members, elected officials, administrators. I even brought my own middle schoolers here to talk about we, as the collective of people who care about kids and schools and learning and youth mental health, what can we do to tackle the very real problems that we face today? And so I want to acknowledge our partners in this effort. This is like a wedding you plan and you hope people will show up, and look at this, you did. We originally thought that this would be about 200 people, and now we are almost 500 people here in this room today. I want to thank the New York State Parent-Teacher Association, the New York State School Boards Association, the New York State Council of School Superintendents, and the School Administrators Association of New York State. All of these organizations care deeply about children and education, and that is why we are all coming together to sound the alarm. We have circled the problem. We know the challenges that we face in our classrooms every day, and we're here today to talk about potential solutions. And so I am really excited to introduce this morning our next speaker, who needs no introduction at all for many reasons, because she has been out front on this issue for over a year now. The governor and I have been tackling the issue of predatory social media companies for over a year and have successfully passed legislation to get that issue resolved. And yes, that is huge. But we cannot stop there. This nation-leading legislation that we passed here in New York State must be considered at the federal level. We also need to start to talk about the influence of cell phones in our schools. Those of us who are in schools every day see the constant use of personal electronics, so not just the phones, but also the earbuds, the watches, and the other distractions. We see the impact they are having on our students' ability to focus, their ability to connect with their fellow students, to be out here in reality, right, instead of in a virtual world, and to engage in authentic learning. So when I told the governor that many of us in schools would welcome this conversation, that we need some state leadership on this issue, she took this and ran with it. She has been around the state holding listening sessions with educators, with parents, with community to talk about how we can solve this very real problem. And she's been clear that she is willing to take any and all action, despite any political resistance, because this is the right thing to do for kids. That takes bravery, it takes guts, and I'm proud that she is the governor of the state of New York. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Hochul.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you. Yes, this is an extraordinary gathering of people that we could not have foreseen. We started talking about this a year ago. A few enlightened people came forward, people like Melinda, but others were not so sure we could take on something so bold and audacious. But that's right up my alley. I like to do that. The issues that others say are too hard to tackle and move on, I say bring them on. But when I have allies like NYSUT and Melinda Person, and all the others gathered here, our school board members, our PTA, our school superintendents, our districts, our principals, parents, I can say there's no stopping us. So we could not have imagined just a year ago a day like today. Absolutely not. And to have so many people here willing to stand up and do what is right. I want to acknowledge some of my colleagues in government. I noticed that we have Senator Shelley Mayer has joined us here. Senator Mayer. Assemblymember Pat Fahey has joined us. Pat Fahey. I saw Harvey Epstein here coming up from the city. Harvey, great to see you as well. The easiest thing in life is doing nothing, right? But when it comes to our kids on an issue like we're talking about today, doing nothing is simply not an option. And when I took office, I vowed change. I had seen that our mental health system here in the state of New York had languished from neglect, forgotten. No one talked about it, but yet New Yorkers were suffering. And you know who was suffering the most? Our kids. I can guarantee that every adult in this room does not wake up thinking about the pandemic anymore. COVID is in the rearview mirror for you. My friends, after listening to countless young people, it is still having an effect on their mental health today. What they went through for a year and a half, 2 years, has profoundly impacted their quality of life and their well-being. So we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that these kids are suffering. And I made a commitment to transform New York's mental health system. And we do it, we don't go halfway. We boosted funding by $1 billion to show our commitment, investing in more psychiatric beds and services and setting aside millions of dollars to help kids with programs, suicide prevention efforts, eating disorder care, peer-to-peer programs. But you know what was so important to me? Was the school-based mental health clinics that when I was growing up, or my kids who are now adults were growing up, you wouldn't have thought you needed. But today, we need them. And we listen to the kids, we listen to parents. And I could not ignore the trends that were emerging beyond the pandemic. What else was having such a detrimental effect on our kids' mental health? And we learned that coinciding with the pandemic was the rise in addictive algorithms, intentionally designed by social media companies to grab your child, your student, and hold them captive. Every generation has struggles. I'm a former teenage girl. I know it's not the easiest time in life. I raised a teenage girl. I'm still around to talk about it, and we're very close now, okay? And none of this is news to you, but the parents and teachers of today are wrestling with something that is unprecedented. And you see this, all of you. I'm not telling you something that those of you who are in constant communication with our kids, our teachers, our administrators, our school boards, you know what I'm talking about. You're on the front lines. And I'm proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with NYSUT and educators to say that, first of all, we have to make sure there's sufficient funding for our schools overall. We've increased school aid. Increased by over $5 billion in 2 years, the largest funding increase in history, and fully funding foundation aid for the first time ever. Tier 6 retirement benefits there to help our teachers. Overhauling the reading curriculum. I listened to Melinda, I listened to Randy Weingart, and I listened to Mike Mulgrew about how we're teaching in our schools, why we're teaching reading and phonics based on a system that was put in place 20 years ago and is not successful. So I don't mind reaching into the world and saying we can do better. All these investments have been made with one sole purpose, to do what's best for our kids. But listen, there's something else going on. What we had to do was address these algorithms aggressively, because I'll never forget one of the roundtables I did locally. Number of high school students, they were describing to me what they were going through, and I felt as a mom, more than anything, my heart was breaking, because this young woman said to me, "We can't put down the phones in schools. We can't do it. You have to save us from ourselves." This was a cry for help that hits you right here when you're a mom, you're a parent, you're a teacher who cares. You can't ignore that. What she was referring to was the fact that she'd be ostracized, that she had to know that the kids who were talking about what she was wearing that day or what she was saying or what she was doing in school or their meeting in the lavatory, she needed to be connected because if you weren't, you were a social outcast. But just imagine a world where no one has the phone with them. No one is an outcast. No one has to worry about being bullied when they should be paying attention to their teacher in the front of the classroom. This is the world we're talking about. The anxiety, the depression, the sadness that never seems to go away. I have close family members. I'm watching them spiraling. They need help. So we took on the social media companies. Not an easy task. I'll tell you that right now, not for the faint of heart. But I said to them, with all these threats of litigation against us, you're going to lose in court. I said, get out of the courtroom and get into my conference room. We can work on this together. We don't have to be adversarial because I guarantee your corporate leadership, your CEOs, your employees also see what's going on with the product you're creating, and there must be limitations on this. Leave our children alone. Let them get some sleep at night. Don't be bombarding them 24 hours a day with messaging that they did not ask for. That's the whole nature of this. They're taking information about your child, your student, and monetizing their mental health by bombarding them with advertising and messaging over and over and over again. They can go to social media sites if they want to. They can go to support groups. They can go where they want to go. But this is about them being on the receiving end of something they did not ask for. So we changed the law. I thank our legislators. I thank Nili Rozek. I thank Andrew Gennardis for two leaders being champions, stood with me and our Attorney General, Tish James. Last October, we did a press conference with our teachers and everybody. And we said, we are going to make sure that New York leads. We're going to be number one in the nation in terms of how far we're willing to go because the costs are so high if we do nothing. So, online privacy. You should not be capturing information about our kids and selling it. You should not be hitting them during nighttime hours. And parents should be able to be aware and turn off the addictive algorithms. You cannot send them this information anymore. And we got it through. The regulations being worked on, and the rest of the nation is paying attention. Look at Instagram this past week. Now, I'm not saying they went all the way. They have some more to do. But at least they took that step that everybody told me a year ago was impossible. Wait, how will we ever know whether it's someone under 18 or not? We don't have the ability to do that, so we cannot limit our activity with kids under 18. I said, really? You're tech companies. You know how to figure this out. Surprise, surprise, they figured it out. And that's what they did this week, and I need others to do that. So we're looking at this. We're looking at the Surgeon General report on how children are held captive. 3 hours is dangerous. The average is 5. I'm listening to teachers, 72% who say across the country this is a huge distraction. The teachers I met in person who said, I'm in competition. I'm trying to teach, I'm trying to engage, make eye contact, have a relationship with these kids because that's how I can create a bond. And they're not even looking at me. I'm tired of this. This is getting too hard. Those are direct quotes from teachers who want to do their jobs. We have to help them as well. So let me say this. We are doing something. We're taking on the tech giants. They're starting to come around. We need Washington to do more. You'll hear more about that. And I thank Randy Weingarten for being a national leader on this and being our champion in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Randy. Thank you. But the cell phone in schools issues, I will tell you this. This has been an evolution for me personally. My kids were in middle school during Columbine, right? This is when you have that sense of security shaken to the core that something could happen to your child when they're out of your watch, something devastating, a shooting, mass shooting. I was listening to a lot of people who thought that you need to have that connection all day long, just in case something happens. And I realized my first thought was wrong. When I listened to law enforcement who said, if there is a crisis on the school grounds, there is a shooter running loose, The last thing you want happening is for your child to be looking on their cell phone, maybe videoing, sending messages, trying to go viral, and not paying attention to the adult in the room who is trained to get them to safety. All I need to hear was that from multiple members of law enforcement, and I said, you know what, you're right. And I also want our kids to grow up free from this influence throughout the day. I can't help what happens after hours. Mom and Dad, that's up to all of you. We need to do more. We need to set the example as well. Let's set the example as well. When it comes to the school day, I want our kids to be kids again. I want them to talk to each other in the hallways. I want them to yell and talk to each other in the schoolyard. I want them to communicate during lunchtime. I want them to develop the interpersonal relationships that are not occurring right now. Because I've said this many times. Our number one job is to raise adults, not raise kids. Our job is to raise adults, fully functioning adults who emerge from childhood with the social skills that they develop in school settings. They're being denied that now because the cell phone has taken over human interaction. We can stop this now. We can work with the kids who've already had to deal with the stress and the anxiety and all those pressures. We can help them. But wouldn't it be fantastic to know that their younger siblings will enter a very different world, closer to our childhoods? When you went out and kicked a ball, you talked to someone on the phone for fun, you got together, went to the movies. Your world was not taken into a device. We owe that to our kids, my friends. We owe that to them. Let's right the wrongs of the past when nobody had the courage to stand up and say, this has gone too far. We did not have leaders like Melinda and everybody in this room say, enough is enough. Let's let our kids have a childhood free from this interference, this disruption. I guarantee they'll be able to emerge fully functioning in technology, go to the tech jobs. All the opposition I'm hearing, I can find an answer and say, no, this is more important. So my question is this: are you with me when it comes to saving our children right here and right now? Are you with me? Can we get this done? Do we have the political courage to stand up and do what's right? My friends, if the answer is yes, we will look back at this time and say, we finally saved the next generation of kids, and it all started in a room like this right here in Albany. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Governor. And I do want to acknowledge the young people in the room. If you're 21 or under, raise your hand. We do have students who are here in this conversation. And that is intentional. Because as I've traveled around the state, I ask to go to high school government classes or public policy classes, and I broach this subject with seniors and juniors, and they usually look at me with a panicked look. And one child, in fact, said to me, "You can't take my phone, it's my constitutional right." And I said, well, first off, we need to review constitutional rights in this class. But I think it's really important that they're here in this conversation because they need a voice in whatever solution we end up proposing or creating as a state, because their voices matter. And we need to remind them that they are participants in this democracy too. Yes. So next up, I'm excited to announce another speaker who has been an important leader across education issues in New York State. Senator Shelley serves as chair of the Senate Education Committee. She is a steadfast ally and champion on the side of bettering public education in the 37th Senate District and beyond. She has always made students her top priority, always. From advocating for funding to her push to expand full-day pre-K, She's prioritized public education even before she was elected to the Senate. In last year's budget, she fought to expand access to free school meals to benefit all students, for funding across the state. So it is no surprise that Shelley Mayer was willing to come here today and speak to us on yet another important issue facing our students, this issue of social media and cell phones in schools. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Shelley Mayer.
Thank you. Thank you, Melinda. And really, wow, you look out and you realize this is a galvanizing issue. And credit to NYSUT and the leadership of Melinda Person, who has pushed this issue, and tremendous credit to Governor Hochul for standing up and standing her ground that we must deal with social media and our kids. Her courage and her foresight and her willingness to take on tough issues, together with the partners in this room, deserves another round of applause. Please credit her for that. So about a year ago, as schools were sort of returning to normal, my colleagues and I in the Senate realized, as is being said here today, that the mental health challenges of our students were becoming quite dominant and that social media was very intertwined in that issue. And I started going on a tour around the state, looking at schools who are doing innovative things about addressing post-COVID mental health challenges and social media. And we went to Canton Central School District, Capital Region BOCES, Buffalo School District, New York City Public Schools, Merrick, Center Moriches, Windsor, and of course the schools in my district in Westchester. And we found that many of these schools had adopted school-specific policies that restricted cell phone use, a variety of ways that reflected their own determinations of what worked. But in many of these cases, they reported to us, one, students were happier. Students fought them at the front end, and students supported them at the back end. Teachers were happier because they could teach, and they could involve themselves with their students, as the governor said. Their boards of education were pleased. Their law enforcement community was pleased, and their parents were pleased. They did different things. They did not have a one-size-fits-all, and I look forward to the governor's proposal. We'll work together with our colleagues to try to find the perfect solution. But the idea of coming up with a way to deal with the pervasiveness of social media, and particularly phone use in schools, was a common thread in these and other schools that are doing their best to deal with the challenges post-COVID and the social emotional loss that parents and children saw. So admitting there's a problem, as we are doing here today, and tackling it deserves tremendous credit. And as the governor said, when the legislature passed this very path-breaking bill to limit what could be done in social media to those under 18, credit to all of us in the legislature and the governor for ensuring that we took this step first in the nation to really challenge these companies to stop making money off our kids and let them return to life as it should be. And noticeably, when this week Meta took some steps, I think they see what's coming. They see what's coming. There is going to be federal legislation that is going to restrict what these social media companies can do to our kids under 18. We took the lead here, the governor, the legislature, and all of our advocates, including the PTA, school boards. Thank you all for being part of that. We have more work to do. We're not finished on that. But thank you for letting us take a lead and send a very strong message. Our kids do come first, and we're not going to make them subservient to the profit-making interests of these companies. So today, as we talk together, think together, work together to try to find solutions, I'm very honored on behalf of my conference, Majority Leader Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins, and I know in the Assembly as well, my partners. We are determined to work together to find a solution that works not only for every school, but all the people who care about our schools, including parents and students. And I'm so glad they're here today. Their voices really do count. They have to help us come up with a solution. We will come up with a solution. Credit to those of you who stepped forward, are here. Thank you to the governor and to NYSUT for their leadership, and I'm honored to be part of it. Thank you so much.
Okay, so before we move on to our plenary panel, I would like to invite you to grab these lovely pouches that are at your table. In the interest of creating an immersive and connected experience today, I would invite you, this is not a requirement, right, to try something a little different, a phone-free environment. I know I see everyone twitching a little. We invite you to place your phone inside the pouch, and please power it off or make it silent before you do that. You're going to push the green button and take a break from the online world. This will allow us all to disconnect and to be present here today for this experience. Now, there are a lot of different ways that we can put phones away. There's a few other common tools that we see in schools every day up here on display. But today we thought, so you could stay close to it, right? We would let you try out these pouches. Now, if you need some phone time, just unlock the pouch, no judgment. But this is, my kids, they're so happy to put my phone in this pouch, I can't tell you. But this will allow us all to be present together for this convening. I want to say a little bit more about the folks that are up here on the stage. Now, they are all here to tell you some personal stories. Personal stories and experiences from their home or from their work that give a sense of urgency to this issue and why we must tackle it as a group of people who care about children. They have lived with the repercussions of social media and cell phone use in schools, and they can speak directly to the consequences if we fail to act. So it is my privilege to bring up our first speaker, Mary Rodee, who is a parent and educator and will speak as a parent and share a very real circumstance stemming from exploitation and cyberbullying on social media. Mary.
Hi, thank you so much. I need my phone a little bit. My name's Mary Rodee. I've been a teacher for 25 years in the Canton Central School District. I'm a mom of 3 kids. It's really nice to be with like-minded people because that's not what's been happening to me so much lately. I was in DC all week before I came here to speak to representatives about the Kids Online Safety Act, the federal legislation that's been mentioned here, and I'll tell you more about that. But before I get into that, this is why I need my phone. I'm just gonna read to you the 21, I hope I can find it, I had it open. The 21 online harms now recognized that are happening to youth right now on these completely unchecked platforms. Okay, here we go. Child and adult influencers, disinformation, misinformation, extremist recruiting, lack of privacy protection, online gambling, online gaming addiction, online marketing to minors. Oh, it's hard to read because I know the kids who died because of these. Persuasive and manipulative design, screen addiction, catfishing, dangerous social media challenges, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, gaslighting, rumor spreading, reputation slander, self-harm, selling illegal street and prescription drugs on social media. there's 21. We didn't add on the mom that we met this week, whose 14-year-old took his life after he figured out that the girl he was in a relationship with was actually an AI chatbot. So I go there to DC after I make my sub plans. And with my new friends who are also grieving parents, one of the hardest things this week was that there was a dad there whose harm was sextortion. And that was the first time that someone was there with the same harm as me. And he said, if only I had known. And for 18 months before his kid died, I was trying to tell everybody. And it's so sad and hard, and this is what I do. I sit in front of people who are so less informed than the people speaking here. Thank you. Maybe they're 22-year-old legislative aides. Maybe they're attorneys who are chiefs of staff, and maybe they're actually the representative. We were feeling such a huge win when we passed the Senate 91-3, full bipartisan support. I could talk to you about the 3 if you want to, but and it's hard. It's hard to get in front of them. The big tech money is so powerful. But here's what I do. I say, hi, my name's Mary Rodee, and I'm from Canton, New York. And this is my son, Riley, who was catfished and died by suicide after a 6-hour encounter with a sextortionist from the Ivory Coast who posed as a beautiful young girl, befriended Riley, sent him child sexual abuse material, which is already illegal, convinced my baby, he's still a little boy, I'm still making his breakfast, he can't drive a car, to send her pictures. And immediately they said, send us $3,500 or we will send your pictures to everyone that you know. And he got braces on that day. We didn't go to school. I dropped him off at his dad's house at 10:30 with some ibuprofen and a milkshake, with plans to see him at the athletic thing we had to go to say he wouldn't do drugs while he played lacrosse that year. And at 2:30, he was in a body bag because someone separated him from everything he knew to be true and right. I'm a good mom. He has a good dad. We showed up every day for him. He had no mental health issues. He did not want to die. He made a permanent decision for a temporary problem. And as terrible as it is to live the rest of my life without him, I'm seeing how terrible it is when your kid suffers every day and you watch it. I wish Riley had given me a chance to help him, and I would have done that. But I see how hard parents are trying to help their kids. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of what Instagram did this week. Do not be fooled. I'm glad they're afraid of us. That only works for accounts made starting that day. Every kid who already has an account gets none of those protections. They could have done this so long ago. The first transparency from them at all was them acknowledging that they had to do something, and I really think that is because they are scared of us. I'm all over the place. So we did make it through the E&C markup. We don't like the language. We really want the Senate bill. My representative, Elise Stefanik, is a co-sponsor of the bill. I would be glad to tell any of you whether your representative is a co-sponsor of the bill. It's really not that hard to contact them. I know we're teachers. We don't want to do a lot more work. But, still, if you want to help me, if you want there to be no more moms holding pictures like this, We need you. We really need people to call their representatives. We need this legislation to go through. We have to show them that our government is more powerful than them right now. If not now, when? If not them, who? We've been working for 3 years on this, and we said yesterday in Speaker Jeffrey's absolutely beautiful Capitol office that we're the first generation to lose our kids to these harms, and we need to be the last, and we need the government to step in and do something about this. So I'm glad to be here with you. My ask, call your rep. I'll tell you if they're a co-sponsor. And one thing I think is a big deal on your phone, just turn off all your notifications. I think that's the simplest thing we can do to set an example. Don't let all those little red dots be on your phone. Only go on those things because you choose to. You want to put 10 minutes into it. I know that we're not going to get away from these devices. We have to be setting a really strong example that it doesn't control us, that we care about relationships, that we want to help kids no matter what. I also have these awesome people here that I know, Randy and David, and if you want to know anything, I have a group that will help you with that. If you want a fact sheet, if you don't know how to talk to a kid about a harm, let me know. There's a grieving mom working on that. So please call your reps. Thanks for having me here. I'm happy to be with you all.
Our next speaker is a parent and the school board president from the Bethlehem Central School District, Holly Dellenbaugh. Holly was put in the place of leading her district through 6 separate threats of violence against students in the last couple of weeks. And so she has been navigating as a district leader and as a parent how to go through very challenging situations in a district where they have already proactively created distraction-free learning environments. Holly.
Thank you, Melinda, and good morning, everybody. As Melinda mentioned, I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Bethlehem Central School District Board of Education. I'm also the parent of 3 children, including a high school senior, so I speak today from both of those perspectives. As you may know, and I'm not going to get into too much detail because I know there are other people from Bethlehem here who are going to speak about it later today, Bethlehem started using Yonder pouches for cell phones last fall. All students at the high school are required to place all personal electronic devices, phones, smartwatches, earbuds, in a personal pouch that is kept sealed during the school day. When our administration first proposed a complete cell phone ban to the board, I fully supported it. I knew that the high school had previously tried restricting phone use in classrooms, but those efforts didn't seem to be enough. And they didn't seem to address the deeper issue of the negative impact of phones on social interaction among our students during the day. And as a parent, I had also become increasingly concerned about my own teenagers' cell phone use. Now, was my high school student a fan of this policy? No. Did I hear a lot of complaints at home? Absolutely. But I was secure in our board's unanimous decision to implement the policy, and I believe it has proven successful. But now, as we begin our second school year with Yonder pouches, as Melinda alluded to, recent events have tested the resilience of our community. Many of you are aware of the troubling events that unfolded last week. Over the course of 3 days, Bethlehem received 6 separate phone calls threatening violence at the high school and middle school. These were really frightening days for our community, for our parents, students, and staff. Many parents understandably chose to keep their children home from school, fearful for their safety. I made the choice to send my child to high school, worrying that actually keeping them home might be harder on their mental health because it would bring back echoes of COVID times and what that meant to stay home from school. And I trusted that the combined efforts of our school staff and law enforcement would keep them safe. But in light of these events, the security threat and the heightened anxiety, the question you might ask me is, did I still think the school cell phone ban made sense? For me, the answer was and is yes. In the event of a real emergency, I truly believed that my child and all students would be safer without their phones. Without the distraction of a phone, they could stay focused on what was happening around them and follow directions from school staff or law enforcement. There would be no risk of a phone ringing or vibrating to give away their location in a dangerous situation. Plus, we would reduce the chance of cell phone networks being overwhelmed, potentially disrupting critical communication for our first responders. And perhaps most importantly, we would avoid the spread of misinformation or rumors, something that in an emergency can, at best, fuel panic, and at worst, interfere with an emergency response. Indeed, after the lockdown that we experienced on Wednesday of last week, I heard from a number of parents and students who told me that the cell phones that were being used, this was after school, only made the situation worse because of the misinformation that was quickly going back and forth and out into the community. And when my child came home from school on Thursday and Friday, they actually admitted that they were happy they hadn't had their phone with them during the day. That's huge in my house. I understand the anxiety about being cut off from your child in a crisis. Believe me, as a parent, I feel it too. I worry about my child every day I send them out the door. But I also trust in the communication between the school and our families. And I feel that the district's transparency and responsiveness have given me confidence that my child is in good hands, even in moments of uncertainty. So while I recognize the concerns, even in light of everything that happened in our district last week, I still believe our students are ultimately safer without their phones during the school day. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary Banaszak. She is the incoming president-elect for the New York State School Counselor Association, and she recently retired with over 35 years of experience as a counselor in the Victor Central Schools. Mary has seen an alarming developmental change in our children spanning her career, and she is going to speak to that. Thank you.
Good morning. Over the past 35 years as a school counselor and 8 years prior to that as a teacher in the classrooms, things have changed, and they've changed remarkably for all of us. As a school counselor, we work closely with other professionals in the school setting, school psychologists, school social workers, our school nurses, all work together under the direction of our building and district level administrators to support our students. Together, we're called the Collective Care Team. We were honored last year when NYSUT invited the professionals from each of our organizations to come together to share our work and our roles and responsibilities and how we work together to be even more supportive and effective in dealing with students. The needs of students are increasingly complex and diverse. Things that didn't exist years ago are prevalent every day in our world and in our school communities. School counselors work across disciplines with teachers, administrators, and our collective care team colleagues to help students thrive in school and to utilize the learning standards that New York State has set forth for us. The New York State social emotional learning benchmarks are skills and competencies students need to build self-awareness, develop positive relationships, manage emotional responses, and make informed decisions. The New York State Career Development and Occupational Studies learning standards provide a framework for career readiness and success in the workplace. The American School Counselor Association Mindsets and Behaviors for Student Success outline the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that students need to thrive academically, socially, emotionally, and in the career world. All of these frameworks support the holistic development of students to create a positive, inclusive school environment that has been impacted by the use of cell phones and technology. In addition to our New York State mandates for school counseling, we know our teachers have grade level and curriculum standards that guide their classroom instruction. And yet our teachers share grave concerns about cell phones becoming a significant distraction within the classroom, impacting students' abilities to focus on the instruction and to relate to other peers and the adults in the school environment. I spoke with our teacher union president last night, and he said, case by case, classroom by classroom standards for cell phone use are not working. They're inconsistent, and we need some sort of framework that is consistent and clear and supported by all stakeholders in order to make a difference in the classroom. Students are struggling to delay the need to read and respond to the information that's coming into them, just as we as adults are. Counselors across the state have shared some concerns regarding the cell phone use in their schools. We all know mental health issues have increased. We all know that sleep issues are impacting students' abilities to be successful in school. We all know that attendance issues are one of the most difficult things to overcome and to deal with so that our students can be in school and learn. Our students are being barraged by peer input, judgment, and ridicule via their cell phones 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are receiving direct threats, they are receiving bullying messages, and exclusionary messages, feeling left out. They are coming down in tears to the counseling office. They are going to the bathrooms and texting friends or their parents to say, I don't want to be in school today. Can you come help me? To the bathroom. We are working hard to bring them into the office to discuss it face-to-face and get the support they need. The tool of convenience that a cell phone began as has become a tool that is contributing to chaos in our schools. We are seeing a need to help them learn how to develop self-advocacy skills on a person-to-person basis, coping skills to be able to get through the school day, solve the problem with adult support. We need to be able to identify how they can resolve conflicts together, that they don't need to linger and be pervasive. We can teach them restorative practices, but we need to do these things face-to-face and not via technology. We have had parents call our office and say, my daughter's in the bathroom, can you go get them? She's struggling. We have had parents show up at school and say, I need to take my son or daughter home, they're having trouble, and we need to work on it. Schools can help if we are in the mix. the picture taking, videos that are sent, impacting high school students throughout the day, talking about what they're wearing or what they said or who they're talking to, is alarming. And it's not just a high school issue. Our elementary, middle school, and high school students are all dealing with exposure to inappropriate, mature content that they do not know how to process or manage. Middle school and high school students report requests for photos of themselves naked, and the sender will threaten to blackmail them if they do not comply. Our elementary school counselor mentioned that there was a third grade girl who reported a boy called her the name Big Back, and she didn't know what it meant. She came to the counselor crying. The counselor looked it up, and it was a song from YouTube that means you're fat. There was another child who was singing, "You've got something up your nose." The students were unsure what that meant. When the counselor looked it up, it was a YouTube song referring to snorting cocaine. These are third graders who are listening to this. Childhood should be a time of exploration, finding your place in the world and who you are within your school community. But students are shifting to an online community in an unsupervised manner. A fourth grade student shared she was being stalked by a classmate on a video game that she and her friend were playing. She asked the other student to please leave them alone and leave the game. She did what she thought she should do. She blocked that person. Instead, that student made a new ID and joined the game again. He had no concept of the boundaries of saying, "Stop, please leave us alone." He said, "It's just a game," when the counselor questioned him. A second grader reported a peer was talking about building a bomb. When the counselor asked the child where he got this information, he said, "The instructions are online, Miss M. It's easy. They show you how." Across the state, across school buildings, across all grade levels, we are seeing increases in anxiety, school avoidance, aggression, and attendance issues directly related to social media and digital communications that students are bombarded with in isolation without adult support or supervision. We are so glad to be here today to help create a solution to help our children and youth be able to navigate these issues. We need to address these issues by creating stronger, more cohesive learning environments that are distraction-free to help our students develop those social emotional learning standards, those career standards, and the mindsets and behaviors to help them be successful as adults. In order to achieve this, we need to find balance to protect our children and youth through clear, consistent expectations, a common understanding of boundaries, and coping strategies, problem-solving skills, all with our community's support. So thank you all for being here today.
And our last speaker for this morning is a classroom teacher, Chris Kasem, who is going to speak about what it is like in his classroom today.
Good morning, everyone. So I have a couple stories to share with you, but I was thinking about what we've been hearing today, and made me think, this is like our modern day Swiss Army knife, right? There's so many different things we get out of this, even as adults and kids. But the one thing it's missing the most is the ability to help us interact and socialize verbally. We've talked about that intercommunication skill, which is like the foundation of societies and civilizations, right? Being able to communicate face-to-face with one another. And that's what brings me here, because as a teacher at Portchester High School in Westchester County, I've been collecting phones in my class in a caddy like that for about 8 years now. I think I'm going on year 9. And I started one day, it was October, about 2016, and I walked into a class of 15 students, and this is what I saw. 15 students staring at their phones. And it hit me. I said, you know what? I can't allow this to happen in this class. I have control of my class. I have control of that 40-minute period. I'm not going to let this happen. Fast forward 8 years, still collect phones. I've instituted in every class that I co-teach in. But it wasn't a school-wide ban. It wasn't a school-wide policy. It was up to the discretion of the teacher just to make sure the phones were away. But when they vibrate in the pocket, it's a distraction. When it goes off in the middle of class, it distracts everyone. So 2 stories that stuck out to me that I've shared along the way. Teaching juniors in high school, right? We've all been juniors at some point or another. And I did the golden rule: you never end class early. You don't give them downtime, because we know what that looks like. We were all juniors. And my phones are in front of the room, and my students are in front of me. And in that last 2 minutes, they were quiet. It was the quietest classroom I've ever encountered. They couldn't speak to one another. They didn't know how to communicate with their peers. And it was heartbreaking, because these are juniors in high school. That's what juniors in high school do. They socialize. It's one of the most important key factors as educators that we do in classrooms. The second, last fall, I had a senior come up to me and said, you know, Mr. Kazem, can you write me a college recommendation letter? And I'm thinking, oh, you know, I'm the best history teacher in the school, really enjoyed coming to my class. She wanted to be a NICU nurse and go into the medical field. So I asked her, I said, well, why are you asking me? Which is a question I ask every student that asks me for a college recommendation. She said, you were the only teacher in my 4 years of high school that collected my phone. I felt more connected, more engaged, and less distracted than any other class. And it made me think, as we introduced this morning, back at the RA, knowing fair well that we were looking into a ban or a policy school-wide, I surveyed about 20 seniors who were graduating as a class of 2024, knowing fair well that they had at least one teacher in 4 years who collected their phones. And the majority, if not all of them, said, I felt more engaged, I felt less distracted, I learned more, and I got better grades. And I think that's the one piece that we could take from the classroom. This year alone, we've started our policy. We're about 3 or 4 weeks in, where we have, it's not a full-blown ban, but it has classroom caddies for every teacher. And I've heard comments from students like, you know what, I'm so glad we're doing this. And I've heard teachers say, I feel like I'm teaching again. So I'll leave off on one thing. The students are socializing more. They're interacting in the classes more. They're talking to one another more, and that's what we need. And what scares me the most, and I think we're at that pivotal turning point now in history, where technology is taking over, we're at that point where AI is on that cusp, and it's going to impact every single one of us. And I think we need to start utilizing this as the tool that it's supposed to be used for, knowing that AI is coming. I want to thank everyone who came together today. I'm glad to see constituency groups, parents, counselors, school board members, legislators, all here for the kids and the future of the next generation. Thank you.
All right, so can we give one more round of applause for our panelists? I want to say a little bit about the day that we have planned for all of you. The next panel that we are going to bring up to the stage is about social media and student mental health. And we're going to talk about how we can hold social media companies accountable and responsible for the content that they are delivering to our youth. The second panel is about cell phones in schools, and we're going to hear from district leaders, educators, and from students about what successful distraction-free learning environments can look like. And then our third panel is about technology in our schools and how we can use curriculum around digital literacy so that in our schools we can actually teach the appropriate use of technology, right? That we're not just putting our head in the sand and saying, let's avoid technology, but how do we teach kids how to be self-aware, to self-regulate, and how to use technology in the most appropriate way. So we have 3 exciting panels. In between each panel, there will be a segment where we will ask you to have a discussion at your table. This is adult learning practices here, right? We're going to talk and we'll have some facilitation. If you wouldn't mind choosing somebody at the table to take some notes and be the facilitator, that will help us make sure that we collect all of the great ideas and information so we can share that with you after the conference. And so without further ado, we're going to transition briefly here to our first panel, which is going to be moderated by Kyle Belakapitsky, the Executive Director of the New York State Parent and Teacher Association.